The worst thing my parents ever did to me wasn't yelling. It wasn't punishment. It was the calm way they decided who I was, like my future was already a closed file. We were sitting at the dinner table. Same house, same walls, same routine. Nothing dramatic, no shouting, no tension you could point at. Just that quiet kind of disappointment that sits heavy in the air. My dad leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and looked at me. The way people look at expired food. Not angry, not emotional, just done. And then he said it. "Be honest," he said, shaking his head. "You're the failure in this family." Not a failure, the failure. The words landed so clean, it almost felt professional. My mom didn't jump in. She didn't argue. She didn't defend me. Yet she just sighed, like she'd been waiting years for him to finally say it out loud. That sigh hurt more than his words. I remember staring at my plate, pretending to be interested in food that suddenly tasted like dust. My chest felt tight, but my face stayed still. I learned early that reacting only made things worse. This wasn't new. Growing up, I was always the slow one. Not stupid, not hopeless, just never impressive enough. My grades were okay. My ideas were unrealistic. My dreams were cute. Every family gathering felt like a performance review I didn't sign up for. Cousins showing off trophies, parents bragging about careers. And me? I was the example they used when they wanted to scare someone straight. Don't end up like her. They never said it directly. They didn't have to. When my dad called me a failure that night, it wasn't heat of the moment anger. It was confidence. Like he'd already watched my whole life play out, and it bored him. I wanted to say something. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to scream that they were wrong. But nothing came out. Because deep down, a small, ugly part of me wondered if they were right. That night, I went to my room and closed the door quietly. The way you do when you don't want anyone to know you're falling apart. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying that sentence over and over. You're the failure in this family. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, like a fact I thought about every time I'd been compared, every eye roll when I talked about my plans, and every be realistic that really meant aim lower. I realized something that night. They didn't just doubt me. They had already moved on without me. And that realization did something dangerous. It made me quiet. From that moment on, I stopped explaining myself, stopped trying to be understood, stopped hoping they'd suddenly see something in me, because hope hurts when it keeps getting ignored. I started watching instead. Watching how my parents talked about success, watching how love came with conditions, watching how respect was only given after proof, and I made a decision. Not a loud one, not a dramatic one, a silent one. I wouldn't prove them wrong with arguments. I wouldn't beg for belief. I wouldn't fight for a seat at a table where I was already labeled. I would leave. Not physically that night, not yet. But emotionally, I was gone. That dinner wasn't the moment my life broke. It was the moment it hardened. Because when people decide you're nothing, you either accept it or you build something so solid that their words can't touch you anymore. I didn't cry that night. I didn't journal. I didn't post motivational quotes. I just stared into the dark and thought, if I'm already the failure, then I have nothing left to lose. And that thought was dangerous. because it was the first time I felt free. They thought that dinner was the end of the story. They had no idea it was the beginning, because the girl they called a failure that night was about to disappear. And when I came back, they wouldn't recognize me at all. Nobody tells you this part. Walking away doesn't feel powerful. It doesn't feel cinematic. It feels like you're standing on the edge of something with no idea if there's ground below. I left without drama. No big goodbye. No speech. Just a bag, a bus ticket, and a stomach full of fear I pretended was excitement. The first night alone was brutal. Not movie brutal. Real brutal. A small room, thin walls, a mattress on the floor that made noise every time I moved. The kind of silence that makes your thoughts loud. I stared at the ceiling again. Funny how ceilings always end up seeing the worst parts of us. My phone was right there, face down, one call away from home. But I didn't pick it up, because going back would have meant proving them right. Morning came whether I was ready or not. Reality doesn't care about your emotional backstory. Rent still shows up. Bills still show up. Hunger definitely shows up. I took the first job that didn't ask too many questions, then the second one, then another. Long hours, low pay, no dignity points. The kind of work people don't mention when they talk about finding themselves. My hands were always tired, my mind even more. There were days I smiled at coworkers and felt fake doing it. Days I watched people my age move ahead while I felt stuck in neutral. And yeah, the thought crossed my mind more than once. Maybe my parents were right. That thought is sneaky. It doesn't yell. It whispers. It shows up when you're counting coins at night. When you split one meal into two and call it discipline instead of survival. Yet when you scroll past other people's wins and feel your chest tighten. But here's the thing about hitting bottom. Nobody's watching. No expectations. No comparisons. No pressure to perform. And that's when something shifted. I stopped trying to impress imaginary judges in my head. Stopped chasing validation from people who weren't even in my life anymore. At night, after my shifts, I didn't go out, I didn't party, I didn't complain, I learned. Quiet learning, messy learning. The kind where you Google everything and still mess up. Phone in one hand, cheap laptop in the other. YouTube tutorials became my teachers. Failures became my notes. I tried things I was terrible at, lost money, wasted time, made dumb mistakes. But every mistake taught me more than all those years of being careful. Time passed, slow at first, then all at once. Weeks turned into months, months into years. My family didn't call. I didn't either. Not out of pride, out of clarity. I realized something important during that time. They didn't miss me. They missed the version of me they could control. And without that weight, I started to grow. Not loudly, not overnight. Just steadily, I stopped checking my phone for messages that never came. Stopped hoping someone would suddenly notice my struggle and clap, because nobody was coming. And strangely, that was freeing. I built routines. I built skills. I built resilience. I learned how to sit with discomfort without running back to familiarity. There were nights I almost quit. Nights I stared at my screen thinking, what am I even doing? But quitting would have meant returning to a place where my story was already decided. So I stayed. One more night. One more try. One more risk. And slowly, something changed. Not in my bank account at first, in my posture. I stopped shrinking when I spoke, stopped apologizing for existing, stopped seeing myself through their eyes. I wasn't the failure anymore. I was just unfinished. And unfinished things can surprise you. What I didn't know back then was this. All those quiet nights, all that invisible effort, all that silence, it was building toward something big, something nobody saw coming, including me. The moment that changed everything didn't feel big. No fireworks, no dramatic music. It showed up on a random weekday, in an inbox I almost didn't check. I remember staring at the screen, half awake, coffee gone cold beside me, telling myself it was probably nothing. Just another, "we'll get back to you," kind of message. I clicked it anyway, and for a second, my brain refused to process what my eyes were reading. Numbers. Too many zeros. The kind of numbers that don't belong to people like me. Not the failure. Not the one nobody bet on. I reread it. Then again. Then once more, slower this time. Like the meaning might change if I rushed. It didn't. This wasn't a lucky break. This wasn't charity. This was a deal. A real one. Months. No, years of quiet work had finally lined up into something solid. Every late night, every risk I almost backed out of, every time I chose learning over comfort, it was all sitting there, in black and white. And suddenly, money stopped being a fantasy. It became a responsibility. My hands started shaking, not from excitement, but from fear. Because here's what nobody tells you about winning. The moment it becomes real, you're terrified of losing it. I leaned back in my chair and laughed. Not the happy kind. The "are you kidding me" kind. I thought about my parents. Not with anger, not even with revenge. Just curiosity. What would they say now? Then I shut that thought down. This wasn't about them. I didn't celebrate, didn't call friends, didn't post anything. I went for a walk instead. But the city looked the same. People rushed past me like nothing had changed, and that messed with my head. How could everything feel so normal when my life had just shifted sideways? Over the next few weeks, things moved fast. Meetings, contracts, lawyers speaking in sentences I barely understood. Every signature felt unreal. I learned a new kind of stress, the kind where mistakes don't cost embarrassment, they cost millions. I double-checked everything, triple-checked myself. Old habits kicked in. That voice from my past tried to sneak back in. Don't mess this up. You're not built for this. This is too big for you. But this time, I didn't listen. Because I wasn't the same girl who'd sat at that dinner table years ago. I'd earned this, every inch of it. The deal closed quietly. And no announcement, no applause. Just a confirmation email and a number that didn't feel real, even when it was sitting in my account. I stared at it for a long time, not smiling, not crying, just breathing. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving. I was standing on solid ground. And here's the wild part. The money didn't make me feel powerful. It made me feel calm. No more counting coins at night. No more splitting meals. No more choosing between bills and rest. I could finally think, without panic. That's when it hit me. This wasn't the end of my story. It was leverage. And leverage changes how the world treats you. I didn't rush back home. Didn't show up waving proof. Didn't feel the need to announce anything. Because I knew something now that I didn't before. The loudest winds don't need noise. They need timing. And timing was on my side. I had the money. I had the proof. What I didn't have yet was the moment. But life has a funny way of lining things up. And soon enough, that moment was coming straight to my parents' door. Here's the thing about facing people who once broke you. You imagine it 1,000 times. You rehearse speeches. You plan comebacks so sharp they could cut glass. But when the moment finally comes, you don't feel angry. You feel calm. The message came from my mom. Nothing dramatic, just practical. There's a family situation. We need to talk. No apology, no warmth, just necessity. I stared at my phone for a long time before replying. Not because I was scared, but because I wanted to make sure I was ready. Walking back into that house felt surreal. Same gate, same walls, same air that once made me feel small, but I was different. Not louder, not flashier, just grounded. I didn't dress to impress. No luxury signals, no look at me energy. And I walked in, wearing confidence so quiet it didn't need proof. My dad was sitting where he always sat, same posture, same expression. But when he looked up and saw me, something flickered. Confusion? Curiosity? Maybe both. The conversation started slow. Safe topics, weather, relatives, small talk that felt like walking on cracked ice. Nobody mentioned the past, and honestly, I didn't need them to. Then someone brought up money, casually, carelessly. "How are things these days?" my dad asked, half joking. "You finally figure something out?" The room went quiet, not tense, expectant. I didn't rush. I didn't explain. I just answered. "Yeah," I said calmly. "Things worked out." That's it. No bragging, no details. But curiosity is loud. My mom leaned forward, but my dad frowned slightly. "What do you mean, worked out?" I took a breath. "I closed a deal recently." Still calm, still vague. "What kind of deal?" he asked. And that's when I saw it. That old confidence in his eyes, the kind that expects bad news from me. So I let the silence stretch, not to be dramatic, to let reality catch up. Then I told him, not the whole story, just enough. The numbers didn't even sound real when I said them. The room froze. No one spoke. My mom blinked like she hadn't heard me right. My dad didn't move. You know that moment when someone realizes their entire belief system just cracked? That was it. I could almost hear the math running in his head. The timelines, the comparisons, the how did this happen? And the worst part for him, and there was no mistake. I didn't smile, didn't look proud. I just existed, comfortably. My dad cleared his throat. "That's impressive," he said slowly. Not proud, not happy, just stunned. It wasn't the reaction I imagined years ago. There was no apology, no emotional moment, just silence. And in that silence, something shifted. For the first time, I wasn't the one shrinking in the room. I wasn't the topic of concern. I wasn't the cautionary tale. I was equal, maybe more. And that realization hit them harder than any argument ever could. The meeting ended awkwardly. Nobody knew how to act. As I stood up to leave, my dad finally spoke again. "You should come by more often," he said. It wasn't an invitation. It was regret, trying to sound casual. I nodded. "Maybe," I said. And I meant it. In the way you mean things that no longer control you. I walked out of that house without slamming doors, without speeches, without closure. Because closure isn't something you get from people who underestimated you. It's something you give yourself. I thought that moment would feel like victory. But it didn't. Because the real win wasn't making them quiet. It was realizing I didn't need their approval anymore. And that realization, that was worth more than any deal. You think the story ends when people finally respect you. It doesn't. That's just where the noise stops. The real ending comes later. When you're alone, and you realize something inside you has finally gone quiet. After that meeting, life didn't suddenly turn cinematic. No slow motion walks, no dramatic soundtrack. Just normal days, but lighter ones. I went back to my place and sat in silence, the good kind this time. The kind that doesn't hurt, the kind that doesn't ask questions. For the first time in years, my mind wasn't replaying old conversations. Not my dad's voice, not my mom's sighs, nothing. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't relieved because they finally believed in me. I was relieved because I didn't care if they did. That difference matters. Growing up, I thought proving them wrong would heal everything. That once they saw success, the past would magically disappear. It doesn't work like that. Success doesn't rewrite memories. It just changes how loud they are. And mine were finally quiet. I thought back to that girl at the dinner table, the one staring at her plate, pretending food mattered more than being dismissed. She didn't need revenge. She needed space. Space to fail. Space to grow. Space to become someone without constantly checking if she was allowed to. I realized something important. My parents didn't ruin me. They just underestimated me. And I stopped letting that define my limits. Money didn't save me. The deal didn't fix me. What fixed me was the work done in silence, when nobody was clapping, when nobody was watching, when nobody cared if I made it. That's where I learned discipline. That's where I learned self-trust. That's where I learned to sit with discomfort without running back to what was familiar but harmful. And yeah, the money helped. It bought peace. It bought choices. It bought time. But it didn't buy confidence. Confidence came from surviving nights I thought would break me, from choosing myself over approval, from learning that being called a failure doesn't mean you are one. It just means someone stopped trying to understand you. I didn't cut my parents off. I didn't punish them with distance. I just stopped needing them to validate my existence. That's a different kind of freedom. Some days, I still hear my dad's voice in my head. Old habits die hard. But now, it doesn't control the room. It's just background noise. And I've learned something else too. Most people who mock you aren't evil. They're afraid. Afraid of change, afraid of uncertainty, afraid that if you succeed without their permission, it means their rules weren't universal. And that scares people. If you're listening to this and you've been labeled The slow one, the dumb one, the disappointment, the failure. Let me tell you something real. Labels don't predict endings. They just reveal who ran out of patience with you. Your timeline doesn't have to match theirs. Your path doesn't need approval. Sometimes the people who doubt you the most are just uncomfortable with the version of you they can't control. And you don't owe anyone proof. Not loud proof, not public proof. And sometimes the best proof is a life lived so fully that old voices lose their authority. I didn't win because my parents were wrong. I won because I stopped letting their doubts rent space in my head, and that's the part nobody talks about. They called me a failure. I believed them, for a while. Then I built a life where their words couldn't reach me anymore. And if you're still in that quiet phase, still doubting, still being underestimated, stay there. That silence, it's not empty. It's building something.